Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's interview with Kelsey, the owner of Grumpelstiltskin's Fiber Mill. And Kelsey also has her shop manager, Tom, here as well. So we're saying hello from Tom as well. So thank you for joining me today, Kelsey. Can you share a little bit more about your fiber mill?
Hi. Yes, I own Grumpelstiltskin's Fiber Mill up here in northern Minnesota. I started just about 2.5 years ago. I bought my mill from New Era Fiber. They were getting ready to retire, and so that seemed like a good fit. So I spent some time out there with them, and then I hired Belfast Mini Mills to ship, install, and train me on how to use my equipment. So, yeah, and then it's been here and been up and running ever since.
So one of the fun things about your fiber mill is you don't primarily do wool, you do other fibers. So can you share a little bit more about what kinds of fibers you normally process?
Sure. For the most part, I do alpaca, and I do primarily Wakaya alpaca, and I do quite a few Surrey alpaca farms. Surrey is the long, curly-haired fiber. I also have some yak fiber in here, bison. Sometimes I do cashmere goat and mohair goat. And I'm also really, really lucky right now. I have a pound of commute, just muskox from Alaska. So I have a large fiber separator. So I'm very lucky to be able to dehair those fibers and drop the outer layer, the scratchy guard hairs from those fibers. So I'm able to do some of those more exotic fibers, or double coated fibers.
Mhm. So now, as you've gotten into being a fiber mill owner, and I know a lot of fiber mill owners are kind of behind the scenes, so we don't often get to chat with them that are behind there doing all of the processing. So in the US, there isn't necessarily a lot of small fiber mill capacity. So one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is what is a wait list typically like for someone to actually get their fiber processed with a fiber mill?
Mm, 8 to 14 months, 9 to 12 months. Everybody's a little bit different, but right now we're all pretty far booked out. You'll find some mills that are under 6 months. You'll find some mills that are over a year and a half, but I would say the average is 8 to 14 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so an 8 to 14 months is pretty typical, and in other fiber mill owners I've talked with, that seems to be very common as well. But now, given that there is such a long lead time, talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen over time with how that fiber is stored. Because a farmer might have to actually, they might actually have to harvest from the alpaca or the other animal, and then they have to store it. So talk a little bit about that part of the process, given that there's these huge long lead times. What are some of the kinds of things that you've seen or that you've noticed and learned over the years about the storage of the fiber before it's processed?
Sure. So I'll talk about some best practices. And the way that I like to store personally, my fiber, I have my animals shorn. It's what's called a noodle, and it is rolled up. It's brought directly to the skirting table. It's skirted, which is the process of removing the undesirable guard hair or the dirt or pickers or stickers or, like clumps of hay, that kind of thing. And then it can be put into a clear plastic bag. Um, Usually we like to see that fiber aired out as well. Animals do sweat. And so if there's extra moisture in the bag, that's also not good. We don't want to just tie it shut and it can get moldy. I put a small piece of aromatic cedar in my bags, and then I put them in a Tupperware container, and I put them in a climate controlled environment. I don't like when fiber is stored like in the upstairs of a barn. It's more that it can get too hot. We see heat damage, just like human hair. We see all those commercials for heat damaged hair. The same thing can happen to fiber. Um, it's nice to have it cleaned off a little bit just because the dirt seems to get kind of ground in, making it harder to clean. And then we want it sealed up, preferably with some cedar, just to deter any pests, moths, that kind of thing getting in your hair. I do not recommend putting balls or dryer sheets in paper. Certain ones. And then just keeping it clean and dry until it gets to the mill.
So there's all kinds of things involved in it that the average person wouldn't necessarily think about when they're thinking about fibers and how it has to all be stored and how it has to all be kept and making sure it's climate controlled. And I think for me, that was one of the more interesting things I had never thought about. And in an early conversation, we were talking about, well, it's no different than what happens to your hair when it's been exposed to heat and too long. It's the same kind of thing. And so for me, that was a little bit of a revelation of, oh, I know what happens to my hair when it's been out in the heat and is too dried out.
Yep.
So now one of the things that you've been doing that's very interesting is you're doing some really innovative things as well. And so we had talked, and for those that maybe aren't regular Handmade Seller readers, Kelsey, as well as Abby, that she works with on some special unique projects around how we're at the beginning of a life cycle of trying to take recycled fibers and turn them into yarn. And so we did an interview, and I was able to publish and share some early experiences. And so there's some things Kelsey can talk about. There's some things she can't. So we're gonna talk about the things she can talk about related to some of these interesting recycled fibers that have been turned into yarn. And so why don't we take one of the early examples where the fiber shredder, this machine that Abby designed, was used to create denim fibers, and you were weaving that with alpaca. So can you talk a little bit about just what was that like and the process from your perspective of the beginning stages of experimenting with these types of processes?
I think every fiber is an experiment. All fibers are different. It's just like human hair, alpacas, yak, bison, sheep. They all have an individual signature to their hair. So, that being said, like every day is an experiment. I really never know what I'm going to come into when I come to work. So that's always fun. But the project that I did with the recycled denim was I got the denim from the fiber shredder, and there's a variety of lengths there. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, what the loss is going to be and what the usability is going to be and what can be improved upon and all of those different things. And so that's kind of something that's happening worldwide is what do we do with these recycled fibers? And so we're trying different percentages. And so denim seems to work well at a 10% ratio. So 10% recycled product and 90% new fibers. And I used Surrey alpaca fiber for that because it has a longer staple length and it has that long curly fiber. So it was nice for a carrier so that those shorter fibers didn't fall out so much. And then we would just get little glints of blue in those fibers. So yeah, things that we're trying. We've only tried with natural fibers, so cottons, wool, rayon, silk. And then in very, very small amounts, the fiber shredder only shreds 50 grams at a time. So that's not even 2 ounces. So a very, very small amount. And even at 10%, that's not, if you think about 1 pound of fiber, that makes it about 2 skeins of yolk. There's 16 ounces and only able to put 1/10 of that in. Yeah. So,
Yep.
so
Yeah, it's the early stage, right? I
yep.
think that's what's so exciting about what you're doing. It's the experiment phase. No one is saying we've scaled this commercially, but we're saying we we can actually do this. I think is the phase that we're at. And so there's the, well, I wonder what would happen, and then, oh, this actually works, to, oh, here's what we're figuring out for the ratios. And so I always look at kind of these whole processes as normally people are only exposed to some of this at the end when it shows up in the stores. What's been so fun about our conversations is, well, we tried this experiment, or, and I'm sure there have been some, we tried this didn't work so well. And that's the
Yep.
nature of the experimentation at the beginning. And do you, as you have thought about kind of how you keep developing out your business with the natural fibers, and how are you thinking about, as you build things for the mill, how you want to keep building things out? Are you at capacity? Are you thinking about growing further? And how are you thinking about your business for the mill with all these different interesting things that you have going on?
My business started and will always be a core custom processing facility. Like you said, a lot of us mill owners are behind the scenes. We're kind of shy. We kind of like to be maybe elusive. I like very much to have fibers coming in from all over the country. I like to process them, and then I like to get them back to their owners, and I like to see what they're doing with their fibers. That's probably my favorite thing. I like to try new things. I mean, even if we're blending with, if someone sends me some sari silk, or if we're blending with bamboo or something commercially available, that's always kind of a fun thing to try too. I'm starting to look at the hiring process and what that would look like. We're getting a little bit of help in here. I do work 7 days a week, 8 to 12 hour days. So it would be hopefully more efficient and hopefully lessen the wait time if I had some help. Um, yeah. So can I expand as far as more machines go? No, they cost a fortune. I have about $250,000 worth of equipment in here right now, and I can, on a good day when everything's behaving, I can run 5 machines. When something goes awry, I can run a machine. So right now, am I going to add any services? Yeah. No, because I just simply can't run anything else on my own. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the exciting phase of, okay, I've started this thing, which, as you pointed out, it is a huge capital investment. It's $250,000 to get the equipment. That's that's no small amount of money, right?
No.
And so there's a whole process that goes into all of that. And then you've grown it to being able to process all of these different fibers. And then at a certain point, and then there's the learning curve of that. One year is different than the next year, even with the same animals. And so there's that learning curve. And now you've kind of tapped out, and now you're in the adding help phase. And so each of them are a different part of the life cycle of business, right? And so it's exciting that you're to the, I'm contemplating getting some help finally, which is great. And I'm sure is a little daunting at the same time.
Definitely.
um, and so if someone was curious about if they wanted to own a fiber mill, if they were thinking about that kind of that whole process, what advice would you give them to research or think about? Because I know we don't have enough people that are doing the fiber mill side of it.
Right.
And there is so much work to be done. And there is an artisan component to what you do with this as well, because no two projects are the same. What encouragement would you give to someone who's thinking, oh, I never really thought about this, but maybe I might want to own a fiber mill? Could you talk
I would
about
tell
that a little
you,
bit more?
yes. I would, and I wish that I would have done this. I did get to spend some time in some other mills. I wish that I would have spent more time in other mills. I wish that I would have gone and worked in someone else's mill and spent more time learning. I also wish that I would have. So Winnie LeBrack teaches grading, sorting, classing fibers, and it is incredibly helpful. Take her class, take every class you can take from her. Those are wonderful classes. And start looking online about how people wash fiber at home, because there's going to be, this is the most wonderful thing that ever happened to me was my water heater went out Thanksgiving weekend, and I was in the middle of an 80-pound order. And so I finished washing this order in my kitchen sink because I didn't have hot water in the mill. And so because things happen. So if you learn how to wash things by hand, or if you learn like anything that you can learn that's going to help you, those things are wonderful. Simply learning how to wash, 1 pound at a time in a 5-gallon bucket, like that will come in handy. Learning the different sizes of yarns, learning what different fibers feel like, learning the different names of tools, because you're going to have to learn how to work on equipment. So learning something about belts and bearings and that kind of thing. But most importantly, going and spending some time in fiber mills. I was really scared. I was like, oh my gosh, well, what if people think that, like I'm going to be a competitor? There's not competition. We are totally, there's way more work than there are mills. And usually fiber mills are very encouraging to new people that want to start a fiber mill. So I've had people who wanted to start a fiber mill come into my shop and do some learning. Yeah, I'd say that most people are pretty encouraging and helpful to new mill owners.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this has been awesome. Fun to foray into some of these new fibers, into what it's been like to be a mill owner, encourage people. Now, if people actually want to follow you online, how do people follow you online? I know you don't talk about the recycled side of it as much, but you do also have fun stories, and Tom is usually there as well.
Tom is
in some of the
there.
posts. So how do people?
Yeah. Just checking. He's watching me to make sure that I'm talking about him, and his grandson Peter is laying on my desk. I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I do have a website. All of those are at grumblestiltsonsfibermill.com. So you can follow along.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelsey. This has been awesome, and I appreciate you giving us an inside look at the mill. It's not something that people necessarily get to see every day. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for everybody else that has tuned in to watch.
Thanks, Amber.